I'll call this special regional council meeting to order. We acknowledge the traditional territories of the Dene and Cree people of Fort Nelson First Nations, whose traditional territory is located at the heart of the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality Administrative Center. We also acknowledge the many Indigenous nations with traditional territories in Northeast British Columbia and the enduring presence of the Métis community. Please be advised that tonight's meeting is available for the public to attend virtually and is being streamed and recorded. Can I get a motion, please, to adopt the agenda? Moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Souls. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Delegation. Greg Van Dolah, District Manager, Dawson Creek Resources Operation, Ministry of Forest. Welcome, Mr. Van Dolah. By way of introductions, this is Councillor Andrews. I'm Mayor Foster, Councillor Danny Souls, Councillor Todd Penny, and on the screen is Councillor Lorraine Gerwin. And with you, you have our corporate manager, Mrs. McIver. We have Ms. Scrimshaw, Deputy CAO, Ms. Laval, and our CAO, Mr. Barry.
First of all, thanks for allowing us the opportunity to come and speak with your council and mayor. Really two aspects that I wanted to talk about today. And the first one is the introduction of the acting district manager in Fort Nelson, and he's sitting in the corner and he's going to provide the presentation once I get through the introduction. Darius Lowe, and he's started in I believe it's sometime middle of August type idea, and myself and Darius have worked really closely together on many of the topics in the Fort Nelson area around tenure. You know, the new tenures coming through with potentially with Peak and Fort Nelson First Nations and such. The second aspect of what I wanted to talk about today is we're starting our engagement. Today is the first opportunity for engagement on the Nonda Creek Road. And we're going to provide you some information that we completed somewhat of an assessment of the overall road. And if you're not aware, there was a significant impact to the road just recently from a flood that, removed, I believe it's 600 meters of that road. And some different, so we've done an assessment. We sent a provincial biologist along with Mike Dolah, who from an engineering perspective went out and did take a look at the road. And the presentation that Darius is going to provide you is going to do a bit of an overview of that and provide, give you a sense of, what we looked at. And we haven't got to the recommendation stage, and we're looking forward to trying to have an opportunity for this council and the community in itself to provide input into the desires of what that road we would actually end up with in the future. We will be meeting with Fort Nelson First Nations yet, and we also meet Wednesday evening with the community of Toad River and to get their input. At some point, we'll be making a decision. We haven't got a time frame on that, but a decision around, whether we reduce it to, something other than it is today, or whether, we're able to get additional funding to do something different altogether. And so maybe instead of me going on, I'm going to introduce again Darius Lowe, your new district manager in Fort Nelson, and I'll let him go on through the presentation.
Welcome, Darius.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here tonight to share this presentation with you. So just as it's coming up on screen there, I will talk a little bit about myself while we wait for that. So I've worked as a registered professional forester in BC since about 2005. Well, I guess it was 2005 when I got my designation. I come from a forestry background, extensive experience with tenuring and forest revenue. So I was really excited about the opportunity to come to Fort Nelson and support my organization, the Ministry of Forest, but as well as this community as it embarks on revitalization of the forest sector, right? So I'm super excited to do that. So still coming up. So I'll make it just a real quick one on my name, because you're probably like, Darius, how do I spell that? Well, you would spell it Darius, and you might have heard people use the name Darius. I won't correct you if you call me Darius, but I do say it with a long I, so Darius. Now that I've talked about it, it's going to be burned into your memory. So there you go. So yeah, we're here to talk about the Nonda Creek Road, and I've had the opportunity to learn about this road over the last several weeks. When I first started, one of the first things Greg said to me is, you know, Darius, you're going to need to think about what we're going to do with this road. So we're really excited to get your guys' perspective of the Northern Rockies regional municipalities in terms of this road. So this is the overview of the road itself. You'll see highway, I do believe it's 97 through Toad River there, and then the road heads up to the north. So go ahead to the next slide. Just so you know what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about the status of the road. We got some ortho imagery, or sorry, some drone imagery of the washout. Talk about the Ministry of Forests, our road funding policy, tenure options on the road itself, and when a road gets deactivated, what kind of process do we go through in that regard. So go ahead to the next slide. So yeah, my understanding of the Nonda Creek, we call it the Tower Access Road. It's an old road that was constructed to the Northwest Tower site. That is not an active site to my understanding. And over, you know, the course of time, a lot of our roads that were constructed over old policy have just kind of existed on the landscape. This road is identified in the Musqueam-Kachika Access Management Area. It's a designated access corridor, and there's an access prohibition on it. So that means that vehicles are not to travel greater than 400 meters off of the route. So those of us that do hunting, that means our ATVs need to stay within 400 meters of that access road. Total length right off of the highway itself is 22.3 kilometers. We got 3.2 kilometers of that inside of the Muncho Lake Provincial Park, which leaves 19.1 in what we call a non-status road. So that means that there's no tenure holders attached to the road, and there's no one that is tagged with ensuring that primary industrial users, the road is maintained for primary industrial users. We have 25 water crossings on the road itself. 18 have culverts in them, including 2 3,000 millimeter pipes at the start of the road, and then there's numerous 600 to 800 pipes on the way up the drainage, or up the road network itself. And there were an additional 7 spots where water was either flowing over the road surface or through the subgrade itself underneath the road. I'm learning about this neck of the woods in that there's lots of opportunities for slumping and sliding. And so typically when you find that on a road, you'd want to establish some sort of a drainage feature there so you don't lose your road into the creek. Information, some more information than what we had on from the previous slide, a little bit of a spatial on it there. So each of these yellow dots are crossing features. One of the 25 either going to be a culvert there or needing to have a culvert there. And then we've identified the section that had the washout. We have sent fisheries biologists to look at this stream network, and we have confirmed that there are bull trout present along the length of the creek itself. We'll have to, if anyone's interested, we'd have to do a little bit more research, like just waiting for the biologist report back to find out how extensive the presence is. But typically when you have a fish in creek, you assume that they can get all the way up the creek unless there's something physically burying a barrier to their passage. And of course, roads that pose a barrier to fish passage are not something that's good, right? So if you're ever going to do work on a creek that has fish in it and there's a culvert in there, you would have to replace it with something that is fish passage friendly. So either an open bottom culvert or a bridge or something to that effect. So that's something to be aware of. Whoever would take on a road like this would need to understand that that is a future potential cost in maintaining the road. So let's go to the next slide. Here's your overview. So it sounds like it was in June 2022, Nonda Creek decided to establish a new channel right down the center of this road. So you can see where there's a decent road at the one end to the left. I'm assuming it flows left to right, but I could be wrong on that. But let's go left to right, and you can see where it's punched through. And there's actually very small sections of road where you can see where the old gravel would be from a road subgrade, but it's largely gone for that entire 600 meters. It's impassable to two-wheel drive and four-wheel drive trucks. However, we are told that ATVs can still use it, and I've been told that ATVs have been still using this road. Hunters are up in that neck of the woods right now using this section with their ATVs. Let's go to the next slide. So this is where we get into talking about the status of the road. So we term roads like these non-status. So that means that there is no tenure on the road itself. And non-status roads do not fall within the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Forests, except for where we need to take actions as an agent of the province. And that would be where a site-specific risk has been identified, whether it be an environmental risk or a safety risk. And when those come to the attention of the district manager, then the district manager must take action to reduce the risk and stop any further environmental damage that is occurring. So restoring a road is not the objective. We don't have any objectives to return non-status road to a status road. Let's go to the next slide. Yes, and so we as the Ministry of Forests, we get no funding for maintenance of non-status road. And like I said, if we identify those environmental or safety risks, then we can apply to our engineering branch. It's a provincial fund called the Engineering Liability Fund, and that is to remove that liability. So it doesn't allow us to repair any of those structures like I talked about. If you had to replace a culvert, then what we would look at doing is rather deactivating the road. So we'd remove all the crossings, and then we put out some signage, and from that point forward, that road is considered closed and discontinued. What we can do is we can transfer that road if there is someone willing to take over the obligations of all those road crossings, and like I said, the associated liability on that road. Let's go to the next slide. So what are the options for an alternative party? Well, there is under the Land Act, we have the commercial recreational operators. It would be designated as a recreation trail. And there's liabilities and maintenance obligations that come along with that sort of a tenure. The lands program is under the Ministry of Forests, and we work closely. We actually have a lands officer here in Fort Nelson, and if someone were interested in this, we would work towards establishing this sort of a tenure for them on that road network. We have talked with Rec Sites and Trails, who also has a mandate for this sort of trail system, but they do not have capacity and have said that they are not interested in taking over the liability on this road and the crossings. So unless we find an alternative tenure holder, then we would look to pursue full deactivation. And then just to explain what that process would entail, we go to the next slide. And that's where we produce a deactivation plan. We have a professional engineer sign off on what needs to happen for the removal of all the crossings on that non-status road. And so in this case, we would look to remove those 18 culverts. We'd establish the natural drainage patterns on the 7 without culverts, grass seeding. And then we would put up some signage at the start of the road. And one of the things that we've talked about is should we be maintaining ATV access? Typically in a deactivation plan of this sort, we would not look to try and maintain it as an ATV trail. We would simply deactivate it fully, recontouring, pulling debris, big tank guards at the start of the road, that sort of things. We need to secure the budget to do that work. We put it up for bid, and then we do the work, and we'd have the project completion occur. And from that point forward, this non-status road would just be part of, the land base. That is it for the presentation itself. I'm not too sure on proper protocol, but do we do questions or?
Yes, I'll entertain some questions. Any councillors have any questions? Councillor Souls.
Yeah, so remind me, how many crossings did you find? How many culverts overall? 27? 26, 27? Is it 25?
I think it was 8. Sorry, I have to look at my slide. It slipped my brain. I think it was 18 crossings and then 7 more. So there's 25 drainage patches. So 18 culverts in total.
Okay, just my question is that it seems like it's no difficulty at all to find funding to pull a whole bunch of culverts out, but if you're missing even one, you couldn't find funding to put one in. Is that correct?
So it would fall under the status of the road again. So, we maybe could find funding because of the presence of fish in the creek. I'm not entirely familiar, but I'll let Greg answer that one.
Yeah, so one of the aspects of this was, if you just follow the engineering liability funding, then exactly how it was expressed in terms of the reason I put a biologist up there is that a couple of things that I'd heard is, first of all, if we could determine bull trout, for example, now we got a species at risk, and now we can apply for potentially a land-based investment funding or HCTF funding to support a plan, for example, around bull trout. The other aspect of what I was potentially hearing, and I haven't had the conversation directly yet with the biologist that was up there during the 12th, and is around where we also are hearing that, potentially salmon are moving up out of the Arctic up to the Liard and potentially into the Toad River and its drainages. And if that's the case, it changes the conversation about what we could potentially fund. And so that's why we went ahead and put both Mike from an engineering perspective on this, of which you pretty much had, and the biologist, so that we could determine whether there's other opportunities to look for additional funding in terms of what kind of passage that we would be considering.
Councillor Souls.
This is just a reminder to the rest of council that it's one of the very, very few access points into the MK, and that the folks in our communication with folks from the Toad River area, they're adamant that that road should stay where it is. So anyway, just let's be thinking of that as we consider what's going on.
Councillor go ahead.
And I just to elaborate on that, that's why the importance that, we're wanting to have the conversations and engagement is, the easy thing for the province to do is to deactivate and walk away. That's the easy thing. The hard thing is what we're actually probably trying to develop here is the engagement to support the opportunity for some type of access into the MKMA, but to a limited extent. And, so there is other options in the Wildlife Act that allows us to put other restrictions on that, which, from from a hunting perspective or from a, access perspective in terms of weight restrictions and those type of things. So just other aspects. So I think currently the conversation is wide open in terms of, what we want, but I would suggest right now that probably the ability to have a four-wheel drive or a pickup truck pulling trailers or a pickup truck is probably not on the table, but it is something less than that, but continue to allow some access.
More than deactivation, less than a pickup truck.
Yeah.
Councillor Gerwin.
Yeah, so was going to be my comment when it just seemed to me the way it was presented that you know, it was like, okay, well, we are going to deactivate this road because somewhere in those 18 culverts, something is going to go wrong at some point in time. So I just want to make sure and get it on the record that this presentation isn't telling us that you are headed towards deactivation, but more that you are engaging with the communities to find out, you know, what could be done. So kind of like a threat. If there's no tenure holder found, then deactivation follows. That's the way the presentation came across to me. And so I'm just hoping that that isn't the case.
So we have some experience in this, considerable experience actually, which was probably not the most favorable from you know, how the province actually reacted to another road that was deactivated. And we went ahead and deactivated it, and it was in the Tumbler Ridge area. And, you know, it was called the Wolverine FSR. And there was the better part, I think 7 or 8 bridges there, and they got to the place where maintenance wasn't being maintained and they were unsafe. And so we had the tricky aspect of having just to pull the bridges and start to do that. Through the public communication and the engagement with the public, but also mayor and councils in Tumbler Ridge, we landed in somewhere else. We landed in a place that we allow, you know, we pulled the bridges, but we actually have stream crossings that you can get ATVs across those streams and those type of things, right? And so there is other options than this. And so I think why the reason that we brought forward the information the way we did is that the province realistically looks at this as this road should have been deactivated many, many years ago, because there is no anybody identified as in the tenure. Our belief is that the people here should speak to it that are using that road, and that we start to at least provide that information to where we go next.
Thank you. Councillor Penny.
I just want to reiterate as well and add a little bit. The accessibility to the MK, I mean, this is really the only point that just about anybody could access it, regardless of their accessibility. There are a couple other routes, but they're 4-wheel drive trucks. They're people that, have to feel very confident in their abilities. And if they're restricted, their accessibility is restricted, it's not a good idea for them to go in there. But this road has been one of those staples, and there's many operators up this highway that do bring guests up there. It's been one of the highlights that we've really tried to promote the last couple of years, with us really trying to drum up a tourism industry here in a town that's been ripped of the rest of industry, right? I mean, you guys with forestry, so you know how long it's been since we got any amount of wood here, and oil and gas has been gone. So we're desperately trying to work towards getting some industry going up here, and to take a blow like this, to lose a road like this, would be disastrous for us at this point. So
And so, last time I was here with Carolyn Vance, who's our regional executive director, and she supports, the conversations that I'm having today in terms of the engagement that we're having, and that we come up with an alternative solution for the Nonda Creek Road. So, well known. I think what we're really looking for is, from whether it's directly from mayor and council, or whether it's a broader perspective from the community, is some written information to us to say, this is what's really important to us, and this is what we would recommend, so that, we can take that and try to fit it around the type of regulation or legislation that we can pull on, that we can actually then maneuver, what the area wants, that we can actually then set that up appropriately. And it may, so it may be a few different things that we have to do to consider this and go and, to make it happen. Absolutely hearing that.
yeah, and I mean, you realize that the liability that the region has taken on with taking over that bridge. So that was a pretty big decision to be made at this table, and we took that on with the idea of access to this road that we heard resounding from everybody that I spoke to in this whole community and operators up the highway. That was really important we maintain access to this. So we've signed up for a pretty big liability here on our side to take care of that bridge. So
yeah. So I think that the other thing that what I've heard is that there is nobody's nobody's telling us they don't want the road. Everybody's telling us, but but we're not getting a consistent approach yet. Some people think we should be able to still haul holiday trailers up that road and that we should rebuild it. Others are saying ATV. So we're looking for more of a consistent approach to what is it, so that we can actually consider that and move that forward.
Councillor Andrews.
Councillor Penny pretty much covered the importance of that road to us, but it's just to expand it slightly more. It's not only an asset for the locals of the NRRM, like it's an asset for BC. We sit here and tout of our natural beauty, and it's one of the most untouched places we have left that you can access. We got hit in June with the washout, a little bit of consistency. I commend you with your approach. I like looking at all the avenues. At minimal, we got to have ATV access. We got to be able to access it. I would love to drive a pickup up there, but logically, I know we won't get the funds for that. It's fight for at least getting ATV, UTV access for sure.
And I think the other really important piece from the prevention perspective is that we need to assess the environmental risk, to that road is we need to stabilize the flooding area, make sure that happens and things like that. And does that mean, because the last thing I also want is ATVs, even though the creek may be drier, that they're going to just run right up where the old road was, right down the creek bed now. And, those type of things. So I think that's the other aspect that's really important for us to consider is the environmental risks that associated the road, so that we firm that up. And, so I would say that from my perspective anyway, at this point, having all the culverts are in there is probably not the best option, but having access through those culverted areas is probably a good option, right? That would be my perspective anyway, in terms of it, at least that way we can maintain and manage the road more appropriately than if those culverts wash out. Now all of a sudden we have no access. So I think those are some of the conversations that we're looking at.
So Mr. Van Dolah and Mr. Lowe, I think you've heard from all of council that we're adamant that we provide some form of access there. And I agree with you that, there isn't a consistent message here because in fact, we don't know what's available. We don't know the amount of funding and we don't know the impacts of the biologist report, et cetera. But as we go forward here, I think we'll get a clearer picture of what is achievable and what funding is available. And then, perhaps look at what options are available to us as we go forward here. I'm sure all of council here would be more than happy to write a letter, to you and your colleagues here, outlining, the importance of tourism, the importance of having that road in the future and the access to the MK, et cetera, et cetera. But, as you do your studies and as you get a broader picture here of what is achievable, I think we will focus down closer onto what's achievable and how we can achieve those goals. Councillor Gerwin.
Yeah, in that vein, who is going to be doing the community? Voice is gone. Who's going to be doing the community engagement then? As you can see, we're not exactly sure. Some people are good with four-wheel drive access. Some people are good with want to have full trucks go up there. Maybe, I don't know, if somebody pulled a trailer up there before the washout, they'd be really brave. But so who is going to do that consultation? Do you need us to do that, or are you doing that? And if you are doing that, then does that information come back to us, or what will be the next step? What will be the process?
Yeah, so, a couple of thoughts I have, we haven't gone that far to, finalize any of this. And so I really did want to hear from mayor and council today. From my perspective, I don't have a direct line of, okay, well, where do we have a community meeting more so where you do? I would actually be interested that the community takes this on and that we do that in support of the community, that we come back and that we provide a similar approach and even around the fish approach, and maybe we can provide a little more detail than we did today. I think the other thing that is probably important is that we aren't there yet in terms of saying what are the options. And I think we need to potentially come back to the community, or at least mayor and council, and say, okay, this is what we figured out now. We're out funding and what other options. And okay, so now, because it's going to come back. I suspect it's going to come down to trade-offs. You know, we're going to have to trade off something for something. And, you know, we can get this funding, but this is what the result would be if we got that versus that. And I think it would be important for the community to weigh in on what that looks like. So the next step from my mind would be that mayor and council would take on an opportunity to put together an engagement session for the community itself. We would attend that and provide, you know, additional information up to that point. And then the next step would be, once we get to a place of having options, that we would come forward again and provide that information directly to mayor and council. And then beyond that, if mayor and council feels it's necessary.
You're also going to be speaking to Toad River and FNFN. And I think, you know, you're going to be getting a wide variety of groups in our community that are going to speak more or less about what you've heard around this table as well. You know, there's nothing wrong with community engagement, but I'm not sure that it's going to provide you with much else other than what you've just heard around this table. It's an option, and we may wish to take that on, but I'm not so sure that those efforts will produce anything different than what you've heard here today or what you're going to hear from Toad River or FNFN. But it's an option.
Yeah, and I would definitely take the lead from mayor and council in terms of if that, you know, if they believe that this is the best option versus the broader public engagement. Absolutely, and you know, we can support whichever direction that mayor and council are considering, and take that you know, as the next step. Absolutely.
Councillor Gerwin?
Yeah, so I'm on the opposite side of what you just said, Mayor Foster, sorry. There you go. I think that we should do an extensive community engagement right throughout the NRM. People need to have their say. I don't know, none of us know what type of funding is going to be available in the future, but like I would be very, very hesitant to just leave it with mayor and council. I would like to see a full-on public engagement. And in today's world, like, it doesn't have to be costly. There's online surveys that we know our community will fill in. We know that Toad River residents are truly invested in that. Muncho Lake residents, our tourism association. Sorry, the people in Fort Nelson are truly invested in this. Tourism BC, like, I think that all of those people deserve to be heard.
Very well. Councillors, then, do you want to entertain a motion then that we engage in a public consultation on this?
I'd make that motion.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried.
So, sorry, I was coughing. What exactly was the motion then?
That we engage in public consultation.
Okay.
Yeah, throughout the process for
Okay.
Nonda Creek.
And by us, you mean like we are going to do it. We can do it in conjunction with forestry, but we are going to drive the process. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Thank you.
So just from our perspective, if you can work through Darius, and you know, we can start scheduling whatever that looks like, and we can start to support the aspects of this with you and go from there. So Darius will be our point on this. Okay.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on, old growth strategy update, Fort Nelson timber supply area.
So it's moving very slowly, is all I have to say. Is we're working through a process right now. We have actually a resource, provided additional resources to support the old forest provincial process. One of the things that why I say it's moving slowly isn't because of, you know, that we're not interested in moving forward on this, but it's currently being implemented through negotiations with Treaty 8 nations, and it's also being negotiated through BRF or Blueberry River First Nations due to the court case. And you know, and there's only really been one First Nation that has broadly spoke out about wanting deferrals. And so realistically, what the expectation is through these agreements that we're working on with Treaty 8, they'll be identifying larger or areas of protection through those agreements, but it's not following the actual aspect of the deferrals as part of the Old Forest deferral process. Although the areas will be encapsulated to a certain extent, not fully, but to a certain extent in those agreements. And a good example is Fort Nelson First Nations indicated they're not interested in directly doing deferrals, but we are, through Boreal Caribou planning and their resource management planning identification, there's areas within the Old Forest that are in those and that would be deferred because it's protecting a very specific species or value that's important.
Any questions? Hearing none. Peak Renewables tenure allocation.
I'm gonna let Darius do some of these too. I don't have to do them all, and I'll let him speak about Peak.
It's really nice having someone like Greg around with a wealth of experience. So if he wants to take the question, I'm more than happy to let him have it. But yeah, no, Peak Renewables. So of course, Peak Renewables, we've completed the tenure transfer. I don't remember the number of the license, but it's about 500,000 cubic meter license transfer. I do believe it was held by Canfor before. So that transfer has occurred. Peak Renewables are a part of the forest stewardship plan for the Fort Nelson TSA, and they're good to start harvesting on that tenure. And so part of my role, I'm new, so I'm trying to figure out who to talk to, but I'd love to have a conversation with Peak Renewables and find out what their plans are on that 500,000 cubic meter license and what the economic opportunities are for it. Peak, of course, are also, we've heard their announcement that they're in partnership with the Fort Nelson First Nations, and the ministry has been working with the Fort Nelson First Nations on a number of tenure opportunities as well. So we're really excited about the opportunity. Like I said, we need to see, actually get some ribbons on the ground and get some, some harvest opportunities identified. But that's the update that I have for you right now.
Any questions? I would say that before that happens, there's going to have to be a discussion with the provincial government regarding rail. And we've had those discussions at UBCM, and I can't say that they are going well. There's a considerable amount of work we're going to have to do here with the provincial government, and rail is absolutely critical to the survival of forest industry in the Northern Rockies. And I would hope that you would take that to your superiors and let them know loud and clear that we need the provincial government to step up with some funding here for the rail and match the funds that are available from the federal government. Any other questions on tenure? Boreal Caribou planning.
So again, we're aware of the email or letter that's been sent by council about being more involved into predator control broadly in Boreal Caribou. And at this point in time, the planning for Boreal Caribou is still in the engagement phase. And as you well know, Chris Cooper, who is your previous district manager, is also still leading it, and he's doing it from his current job and as a district manager in 100 Mile House. So in terms of the decisions that have been made outside of the land planning process that has occurred with Fort Nelson First Nation and the recognition of their resource management plan that's been developed by Fort Nelson First Nation, I think the mayor and council here are very aware of that plan and the current Boreal plan. And I think you're mostly interested in whether or not the province is going to consider further engagement into predator control. That interest has definitely been brought forward to the to us and as part of the consideration, and there'll be additional conversations, but it's still pretty early in that. There is some tactical challenges with predator control on Boreal Caribou. versus mountain caribou and how that works. And so there's some logistic conversation, but absolutely the province will support ground predator control and support for that. What that looks like at this point in time is actually not fully recognized or established. And because there has been, I would say, a very modest result on the ground in terms of predator control, specifically around wolves. One of the things that we are considering is some other projects around. What we're not seeing interesting is around calf recruitment, for example, in moose, where predator control is occurring with wolves. And what that broadly tells us is that from a wildlife perspective is that other predators are impacting this as much as wolves are impacting that. So those are some of the projects that we're considering, and whether or not how we need to get some of that data to actually support the conversations around what else, instead of just everything's a wolf problem, right? From that perspective.
Thank you. Councillor Gerwin.
When you get to the predator management planning process, are you going to include residents of the NRM, Trappers Association, First Nations that are operating on the land, or are you simply going to, is it going to be a research-based plan that, sorry, that has used old research, not current research? I guess my question would be, at what level are you going to make up this plan using local resources, human resources in the NRM?
Yeah. So a couple of responses to that. The first one would be is we do have a caribou team that virtually focuses on the work around caribou, and honestly, we don't focus as much on caribou because we do have this provincial caribou team, and their exact approach is better to be discussed through people like Michael Huck, who I think has met with us before, and
Oh,
also
sorry,
Chris
I meant
Clifford.
the predator management plan. Sorry.
And I'm meaning that too.
Oh,
So,
okay.
That's absolutely the case. But the project that I'm speaking of a little, it also is where your comment around new research or new data is around, collaring other predators to get an associated understanding of whether or not they're actually creating, a challenge to calf recruit. And I think that's a really important step, because right now all we're doing is managing wolves. And if it's not having an impact on, calf recruitment across it broadly outside of areas where caribou are being penned, for example, you got to do additional projects, then it's not going to be helpful. So the project I'm talking about, which we may or may not continue with, we're in the very, very early stages of it, is actually putting collars on bears and cougars and grizzly bears, black bears and such, to determine whether or not they're creating a significant impact too, so that we at least have that data. So there's some options that we're considering beyond just predator control first, so that we know exactly what type of strategy we might need to do. Does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, very much it answered my question. Is not headed the way I would like it to head. So thank you for being clear on that. Is there any opportunity to be running two programs parallel? So you have a predator management plan running parallel to your, conducting research, collaring grizzly bears and etc. Like, could they be run in parallel? Because, there is a school of thought that says if we don't do some predator management, we are not going to be, we're going to be having less caribou.
Yeah. And, at this point in time, we haven't gotten to the detail of that yet, especially in Boreal. And based on my previous conversation, Boreal is very different in terms of predator control, in terms of how you actually would, do wolf predator control, for example. It's just not, it's not as efficient on the Boreal plain versus being up in the mountains. And so I think we really do need to have the data before we would actually move forward. and that type of thing. And so, but I do hear you that, you know, you're concerned about caribou populations, ungulate populations, and the time that we take to do this work. And I think that's, you know, with everything, there's trade-offs and there's risk. And I think that's, you know, but the challenge is we could do a year's worth of predator control and completely not do well, and then not be any better off and have spent a lot of money doing it.
And sorry to be the only one speaking here. So promise I'll stop. But so at what point in time will you be, or if at all, would you be, like, there's a wealth of knowledge on people that are working the land right now. Like, we have many trappers that are out there winter and summer, like they know that land, they know the populations. Like, do you engage with them before you start, whether a predator management plan or a research plan? Like, do you try to gain the knowledge that they have? They have years and generations of experience on the land.
So we, in terms of the, you know, if you take some of the predator management projects that we're currently in, we absolutely utilize all the trappers that are, you know, licensed trappers within trapline areas. First Nations are involved. They've been involved at doing ground trapping and those type of things. So they're always involved. We also utilize First Nation trappers that are, you know, understand, or, you know, the lands which they do, that they actually are providing us a lot of intel on, you know, where wolves are, you know, those type of things. And, you know, the project is a huge project in terms of, you know, logistics, and, you know, making a satisfactory predator control project it takes more than just the province biologist and myself, for example, to make it happen. We take advantage of all the opportunities we can in terms of trying to initiate the best outcome and at the cheapest price. In a lot, anyway, that's what we're always looking for sure.
Thank you.
Councillor Penny.
I'd just like to say I'm really happy to hear that you're going to be looking into other predators. I'm not sure. I'm sure you've seen some of the research come down out of Alaska. They had no idea how many caribou were being consumed by traveling grizzly bears. And now that the province of British Columbia has been, I think, going into its 4th year now of no grizzly bear hunt, somewhere in the neighborhood of several thousand more grizzly bears in our province now than we had.
So just to yeah, for sure. You know what? Actually the Alaska project is the one that we have been focusing on. We've actually been in touch with the individual who ran that project, and I think you're talking about somewhere in the neighborhood of about 45 calves were killed by one grizzly bear over the course of less than a 6-week period or something like that, right? So we realize that, but we're also cautious, and the reason we're cautious is because there's a social aspect to predator control. And I think we need to state that, be upfront, the fact that, you know, there's the people like ourselves in the northern area where you see the impacts and people are working in the lands like we are, is very different than the perspective that, you know, people in the south have. And my perspective is on it is that, you know, we just need to make sure that we have data to really be supportable before we go ahead and just say we're going to do something, because I don't think we'll be successful without supporting data to provide the broader context of the population in British Columbia.
Thank you. And, you know, if I have one criticism, it is that we don't have enough data. We're trying to make decisions here, the province is trying to make decisions here on insufficient data and small numbers. And we really need to get a grip on the entire problem, where it's coming from and what the solutions are before we start spending, as you said, lots of money to create an outcome that is insufficient. So I'm very interested and very hopeful that the province will spend that money on research so they have a handle on exactly the problem. Are there any other comments on this? Councillor Andrews.
I appreciate the comment of being upfront about the social issue of it all, but socially we are collectively deciding that one species is more important than the other, whether we like it or not, by doing nothing. It is a management plan that we've decided to be forced into. And without insufficient data, we don't know if we're doing the right thing or not. So I definitely empathize with the decision you guys got to try to make.
Any other comments? Very well. Ms. Vandersteen. Sure, there's one right there. You can temporarily be Councillor Roper.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak. Bev Vandersteen. I'm with the Chamber of Commerce as well as the chair of the Tourism Action Committee here in Fort Nelson or in the Northern Rockies. And just wanted to speak for a moment about Nonda Creek. We've been interested, this has been a topic of discussion since Northwest Tel announced they were taking down that tower site. This is one of the few access points, not only from Musqueam-Kachika, but as Councillor Andrews and Penny's mentioned, accessibility. And what we've been hearing is we really do need that full vehicle access. Now, I don't think we need to be able to take a 50-foot motorhome up there. However, the Tourism Action Committee has recommended that access for vehicles be maintained. Currently, people, not currently because it's washed out, prior to that, people would take people with accessibility issues, our elders up there so they could appreciate and enjoy the backcountry in a way that they maybe can't do in other areas. The province does have a mandate to increase accessibility for all. And we do think the vehicle access needs to be maintained there. We have so few places where people can access the vistas of that nature in the backcountry and the mountains. So that's my piece on that. I think it's really important and hope that this engagement the community is able to participate in. And then I'd also like to just comment on the peak renewables tenure allocation and echo Mayor Foster from a chamber perspective, the importance of rail here. This is a battle the municipality and the chamber has been fighting. Well, we've been working on it since 2013. It's crucial to the area and to industry in the area. So any extra pressure, I know it's not your field, any extra pressure you can put on is important, partially because it's essential to local utilization of fiber. And we need to see industry develop within the Northern Rockies. Thanks very much for your time. Thank you, Mayor.
So maybe just I'll comment on your first about Nonda. I really appreciate if you'd provide a response directly to Darius and provide that information to us in terms of the type of individuals and the type of access you're looking for. I think there's going to be an opportunity that like I said, that we'll be able to get a certain amount of funding. And then and maybe that's just the start of it in terms of we've got this and, maybe there's another options here that we can talk about in the future. And that might be something that is beneficial to everybody. So I think we're open-minded. It doesn't just have to be all government funding and that's it, done, right? So I think that's the other aspect. We're going to get to the level you're talking about. It's not just the funding we're going to be able to find. The access, the whole rail issue is a significant issue that we're all aware. We all recognize the challenges that it creates and for the community and we talk about it all the time, right? And that I think the response that Fort Nelson First Nation received, they were really quite happy with the response around the tenure allocation. But again, the rail is the big issue. Our executive is fully aware of that issue and has been providing that information directly up to our minister and minister through to cabinet. You provided it at UBCM, those type of things, along with other issues that you brought to UBCM. So absolutely recognize the significance of it. And, like I say, my perspective is that if it was required, you'd have it tomorrow. But the challenge is that I don't make those decisions, nor the economic decisions, but those are the aspects of it, right? Okay.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for Mr. Dolah or Mr. Lowe? Very well. I'll thank you, gentlemen, for your time then. And I'll ask for a motion to move to in camera. Moved by Councillor Andrews. Second by Councillor Souls. All those in favor? Carried. And we are in an in-camera meeting. I'll recall this special regional council meeting. And I'll ask for a motion to adjourn the special regional council meeting. Moved by Councillor Penny, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor. And the special regional council meeting is adjourned. Thank you.